Okay, welcome everyone. This is Kaveh, and I am with my wonderful colleague, Emily. Emily, do you want to say something?
Hello, colleagues. Happy to be here. Welcome to this session.
Great. So in this session, we're going to talk about how we can develop chapters. And in particular, we're going to talk about having a business model to helps us designing and developing a strategy for chapters. So we share a way for defining a business development chapter strategy first, then we walk through non-critical components of chapter business development, and finally, we will describe the role of each element. And then we share with you an example based on our interview with one of the chapters, Kenya chapter, that Emily has done for us. So let's just go and just remind ourselves of the objectives. So these are some objectives that we hope we can achieve by end of the time that we have together. One is to be able to create chapter business development strategy using business model canvas. Two, to review an example chapter business strategy using business model canvas. And in here, we're talking about the case study of Kenya chapter. And finally, to become familiar with the key components of chapter business development strategy. For example, chapter target market, key partners, activities, value proposition, key resources, cost structure, and hopefully, last but not least, revenue stream. So in this presentation, we are going to introduce to you the concept of business model canvas to help us to explore various different ways that we can design chapter business development strategy. So let's talk about the business model. So some of you might already be familiar with the business model canvas. The business model canvas was designed by Alexandra Osterwalder, I think, and his partner around 2007. Since then has become a very popular tool, and many organizations, as you can see on this slide, are using the business model canvas for designing, developing, and sharing strategies. I pass this now to Emily to tell us why and how the business model canvas hopefully would create value for us.
Right, so let's get into it. The first one is that we're able to create better conversations on the business strategy because it's very visual and it's quite straightforward. It creates a shared language that, for example, if implemented, every other chapter would be able to kind of speak the same language because it's simple and quite structured. And the third reason is that, there's better teamwork because we are all connecting with the same elements. And it actually a tool that provides an opportunity for everyone to contribute at the various elements of the business model canvas that we're going to discuss later on today. And finally, it is structured, has practical outcomes of how to implement it. And we will be looking at an example later on in this conversation. And the next one is, why should you adapt the canvas for designing chapter business development? One, it's visual. It's a visual tool. I think most of us like to see pictures. We want, just connecting the dots, and it's something you can actually just look on a page and be able to just see everything on one platform. And the second reason is that it's practical and it's quite straightforward to use. We promise you that it is, and you will see that in a bit. It is quite intuitive and it's also affordable. Maybe Kaveh will tell us how affordable that is towards the end of the session.
Great, Emily. So let's first get familiar with the whole business model canvas. As we said early on, the canvas is made up of 9 blocks. And what we are proposing is that when chapters are thinking about designing their business development strategy, they pay attention to how these 9 blocks are interacting and are aligned with each other. So first, we're going to have a quick introduction to each of the 9 blocks. So let's start by first block. We call this one chapter target segments. So the type of questions that the chapter leaders should ask themselves are, for example, for whom are we creating value in our chapter? Who are most group of people that our chapters would target? And in here, we really want you to start thinking about 2 concepts, segmentation and target persona. So in marketing, market segmentation is the process of dividing a broad customer or business market, normally consisting of existing and potential members, into subgroup of consumer known as segments. Based on shared characteristics, these segments are formed. For example, it might make sense for some chapters to have segmentation based on credentialing. So have group of people that would target based on their credentials, ACC, PCC, MCC, or even no credential. For some chapters, it might be more sensible to group and segment based on coaching experience, maybe coaching niche, or even generation. The target persona sometimes has different names like buyer persona, marketing persona, customer persona, audience persona is an essential aspect of marketing. Having a great persona would help you to craft content that your ideal target would surely respond to. So the next item on the business canvas is key value proposition. So in this area, we want the chapters to ask themselves example of these questions. So what value do we deliver to chapter targets? So if we have ACC, what value do we provide to ACC or PCC or MCC? If we are segmenting by credentialing, which of our targets' problems are we helping to solve? What bundles of products and services are we offering to each target? And which targets' needs are we really well satisfying? The next component of the business model canvas is the communication channel. So chapters need to ask themselves some of these questions. Through which channels do our target segments want to be reached? How are we reaching them now? How our channels are integrated, which one works best, which ones is the most cost-effective one, and how are we integrating them with the whole customer routine, customer management, member management. Next block that we invite you to think about is about stakeholder relationship. So the type of questions that we want chapters to ask themselves when designing a strategy is what type of relationship does each of the target segment expect us to establish and maintain with them? And what I mean by relationship, we can think of a dichotomy of at one end, the chapter could have a very relational connection with all these targets. For example, they know each other, they know everyone by name and backgrounds, and sometimes the connection is very transactional. So the chapter needs to decide how are they going to connect with this target? Is it going to be more relational way, more transactional way? Of course, there is no one way that fits and suits everyone, because one of the key things is how costly is the type of relationship that we're going to maintain with our target groups. Next, chapters should ask themselves some of the key questions, such as what are the key activities that our value proposition require us to do? So in order for us to deliver value to our members, what activities should be our main activities? They can ask the same question about the channels, about the relationship, and also about the revenue stream. I propose that in a very simplistic way, you can think of your core activities. Of course, every chapter does many things, marketing, operation, admin. But the key question in here is that what is our core activities? Are we in production and selling? Are we in problem solving? Or are we just in creating network and connecting people together? What is our main key activities? The next thing that we like the chapters to think about is the key resources. So the type of questions they could ask themselves are, for example, what key resources do our value proposition require? What key resources our distribution channel requires? Our customer relationship, our target relationship requires. And in here, we want to invite you guys to think about your key resources, the resources that would make you unique, different to other bodies. And this could be physical, intellectual, human, or financial. So an example of a financial resource might be that your chapter has good cash flow. And hence, one of your key resources is the cash that you have in the bank. The next component is very important, is the partnership. So in this box, we like chapters to ask themselves some of the questions, such as what are our key partners? What are key suppliers? Which key resources are we getting from partners? And which key activities do partners perform? I'd like to invite you to think about that when you have a partner, you think about, why am I having this partner? Is it because I want to optimize and because of economy or reduction risk? Or is it because they provide something that I do not have? The next box on the business model canvas is the chapter cost structure. So some of the questions the chapter should ask themselves is that what are the most important costs for the chapters? What are the key resources, cost for the chapters, and what are the key activities, and what is the cost associated? Last but not least, in order for you to come up with a business strategy, you also need to pay attention to your revenue stream. So example of questions that you need to consider is for what values our targets are willing to pay. What do they currently pay? How are they currently paying? How would they prefer to pay? And in here, I'd like to invite you to think about, typically chapters have two types of revenue: subscription fees and advertising. Typically, of course, there are exceptional circumstances as well. You need to think about when you, for example, think about your advertising, do you go for fixed pricing or dynamic pricing? So these are some of the parameters that you can think about when you are thinking about your chapter revenue stream decisions in designing your strategy. Okay, so I'm suggesting, Emily, that we look at some examples. So hopefully some of this becomes a bit more clear. So I know you spent a bit of time with one of the chapters, and I'm very, very eager and curious to listen and learn from what you've done with Kenya and what can we learn from them.
Thank you, Kaveh. So let's look at the case study of Kenya. And before I just share this, I just want to appreciate the leadership of the Kenyan chapter, who accorded me their time to just go through this exercise, led by the chapter president, Decima Ogutu. Thank you very much. The Kenya chapter has just over 100 members, growing. It's currently a chartered chapter. So well done on your progress. Let's begin by, bringing it closer home based on what Kaveh has just shared with us. And the first box we're going to be looking at is the chapter target segments. So who does the chapter target? Their primary target group is coaches, obviously, those that are already graduated, for example, recently from schools. We also have another category of coaches who are relocating into Kenya. They do not have an affiliation yet, and so those already become individuals that they're targeting to grow their chapter. And also these individuals would be looking to a community that they can, they can align with. Then we have coaches from other countries who do not have a chapter. More recently, Kenya was housing the Ugandan chapter before, they became a chapter of their own. So for a while there, they had affiliated members from Uganda. And then there's, of course, the internal and external coaches. Now, looking at this survey, is there anything do you think is missing, or, could they be looking at other potential markets?
So what I like about is that how well they've kind of used different segmentation. You can see that, they've got coaches freshly graduated as a specific target because they have certain needs that maybe other coaches would not have. And in their strategy, it seems that that is one of the targets they're going for, as well as the other targets that you mentioned. So of course, with the segmentation, we can be as creative as we want. We can segment by credential leveling. We can segment by coaching niche. We can even segment by generation to pay attention to, is the target certain age ranges that they need to bring into the chapter? And of course, as you know, that plays really well with the diversity and inclusion, because, you have wide group of representation from different generation. That means much more diverse, more creativity, more collaboration, and the impact of that would be huge throughout the whole chapter. But I like the way that they've kind of done the chapter segmentation. Shall we go to the next box?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay.
So value propositions. So what's the key value proposition for this chapter? They have 3 of them, and one being continuous professional growth, visibility for coaches, and then you have credibility. So for this, if I was just to speak a little bit more on this, the professional growth is achieved through the activities, which we're going to explain in the next slide, that include education activities, and also the programs that are already offered within the ICF itself, ICF Global. And then you have chapter members who are given opportunities within the chapter, either to take part in leadership roles and also to provide their profiles maybe on the ICF website. Whenever they have events, the chapter members are really brought to the fore, so that creating visibility for them, and even as they create awareness of what coaching is in the country. And of course, because the ICF in itself represents a gold standard, and by affiliating with ICF, then there's the credibility that's earned by their members. So even as they target coaches coming in from the schools, they're saying, you know what, you don't stop there. You need to join the ICF. It gives you more credibility, not just at a local level, but a more global perspective as well. What do you think about those, Kaveh?
I think it's great. So these are very common in terms of why people join coaching bodies. They want to grow, they want to have credibility, and visibility is very important for them. Now, what I think maybe sometimes chapters don't pay as much attention is that for visibility of their coaches, maybe if I just go in here, they need to bring another target in here, and that might be organizations. In other words, if they want organization to see coaches, not only they've got to go after people that are interested to become coach, they also need to start thinking about who will consume coaches, who would be the coachee, as we call them, or the client. And as soon as they put the target in here, they need to think what is the value proposition that they're going to offer them. So they then start seeing seeing the coaches that they have as a member, and they would enhance the visibility for coaches.
Like that, actually. I hadn't thought about that, actually. Instead of just looking at coaches individually, you look at the organization as a target group. Because a lot of these are also working with HR professionals, for example.
Yes. Okay, let's go to the next box.
Right, communication channels. So what does this chapter use to communicate? to their members or even to the general public. They have a website that has got content on what chapter activities are. And even more recently, they started inviting their own coaches to advertise themselves on the site. So being one of the benefits of joining the membership. They also use coaching schools. For example, when schools are graduating their students, they would be part of the celebration. So they use that to communicate the value of ICF and hopefully attract members to join them. And then the social media, largely, most of the time they're using LinkedIn, Facebook, and WhatsApp. And for this particular chapter, they have a WhatsApp group that once you join the ICF membership, you also become a member of that group. And it's very vibrant. And especially during the pandemic, it really became quite a connector. You know, all the updates would be done through that group. And they also do this on Mondays. They also have a market day where they share, you know, they allow coaches to share their opportunities for building their businesses. What are they offering? And also use it to celebrate one another. I found it quite vibrant and quite a great idea of really connecting and bringing everyone together, especially during these times when everything is virtual. And of course, member referrals is another channel. And lastly, forums and events, as most chapters would do, with the International Coaching Week being the largest event that we do every year. But then in between, they also have coffee chats, they also have education forums, and also conferences that they would use to communicate all things coaching, all things ICF to both the coaches and the public.
Great, fantastic. Looks wonderful. Looks good examples of very creative ideas. Shall we go to the next one? The relationship.
Yeah, key stakeholder relationships. I just talked about the coffee chats, which has been a constant engagement that the chapter has been having monthly. I believe it's every month or so. They would just have easy chats. They would call them virtual coffee chats. And whoever joins, whether it's 5 people, 3 people, and they would go into breakouts. And there's always a check-in question and just checking in on each other and just having a laugh. There was lots of laughter during the pandemic. I thought that was a really cool idea. And the other piece that they do is regular volunteer meetings, member benefit awareness sessions. They run this especially for potential, members who want to join ICF, but they haven't really understood the why. And so they would invite those either from the schools or anybody who just is not really clear whether to join ICF. So they would create those sessions once in a while. They also do have in-person connections, such as the end of year dinners, where they celebrate their achievements. They will invite all the chapter leaders, previous and current, and it's really a way of connecting and also sharing and celebrating the milestones, and as well as informing the new members and the new joiners part of the history of ICF Kenya chapter and all the great things that they're doing. And then you have the AGM, which is an annual, more structured board governance type of meeting, really communicating with members around the businesses of the chapter, the finance statements, position of the chapter and the activity, so that members also feel involved. They're also invited to join committees. And of course, we also have the website listing, which I mentioned earlier on. Yeah.
Great, wonderful. And what I can see in here is that there is quite kind of a close relationship between the members, which typically is the pattern that we see. So when the chapter is small, it makes sense to have a very close relationship as a strategy, getting to know everyone, which then impacts the channel, which is more about referral, about word of mouth. And as the chapter grows, maybe for some segments, for some targets, having a close relationship is going to be very costly. And remember that sometimes for certain targets, segments, we could have close relationship. For certain segments, we can have more transactional relationship. So we can even have both of them on the same strategy, depending on the target and the segment.
Very true. It would be interesting to see what a larger chapter with probably close to 1,000 members would look like.
Yeah. Okay, let's go through activities.
Right. So what sort of activities does the Kenya chapter, get involved in? They include networking with other coaches, and we've talked about some of the platforms they use for networking, marketing coaches' businesses through the WhatsApp platform. Like I said, they do this on Mondays. Is a special day, is a special market day where they market each other. Somebody is launching a book, they will celebrate them. Someone has started a school, or somebody is selling something, a product or a service. So all these are shared on the WhatsApp platform. And then there's linking coaches with other affiliate opportunities. So whenever there's an opportunity somewhere, it is shared within the group. And of course, celebrating coaches upon their credentialing. So it's such a big deal. So every time there's a new credential, whether it's ACC, PCC, MCC, then you would have them being showcased and celebrated. And it also creates, competition amongst the coaches, those who haven't achieved their credential, to kind of just get the energy and inspiration to also attain theirs. And of course, sharing the business opportunities. So those are some of the chapter activities currently going on. Yeah.
That sounds great. I can see now, for example, celebration of coaching, achieving credential goals close to the value proposition, which was about visibility. So you can see, because they've identified visibility as one of the key value proposition, they have the supporting activity, which is celebrating a credential to deliver that value proposition. And here's a good example of how value proposition is linked to the key activities. Mm-hmm. Okay, shall we go to the next one? Here we go, key resources.
Yeah, key resources. So they have a secretariat in place, which is largely a virtual office as well. And then this has really shifted from the time the chapter was small, but as it grows bigger, as Kaveh mentioned earlier on, even in terms of the relationships that you're having in the interactions, the demand is more, and therefore there's that need to have a central support from an administrative perspective. So they do have a secretariat, and they also have volunteers for committees. So once in a while, they would encourage members of the wider chapter community to join different committees, whether it's education committee, public relations committee, or even when organizing for ICW, for example. And then they also do have their legal support, lawyers and auditors to support them on their side of compliance. And Zoom platform, also being able to invest in the Zoom platform and the website. And I believe ICF Global has also been supporting chapters on this particular front as well.
Yeah, great work and lots of great ideas. And I just want to remind the chapters that one of the key resources that makes us so different to other coaching bodies is our brand, is our international brand. So never forget that, ICF international brand is one of the key resources that makes us so different to other bodies. And it's one of those resources that is very hard for other people to create. It takes very, very time and money to have that international brand. So, never forget that the key resource for us is the ICF international brand.
Absolutely. And actually ICF Global in itself, Kaveh, as you said it, because it's a lot that chapters are drawing. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. So yes. That's really a great point there to add.
Yes. Okay, shall we go to the partners?
Yes. So partners are, so if you link this to what we've just discussed, you have training schools. This is where they would get their graduates from, for example. When you look at the target segment, so during graduations, they would visit, they would be part of the celebration so that they can sell, the value of membership there. They're also working with professional institutions right now to either do training within coaching and also coach their executives within these bodies. For example, one of them is the Kenya School of Government, the professional body for human resources, and another one which works with small and medium enterprises called Invest in Africa. So these partnerships have really helped to expand the level of awareness coaching within the country, but also, include the executives in the coaching conversation, which has been great. Corporates are another key partner for them. And of course, not forgetting the media. A lot of times we've seen them partnering with one of the media houses, more especially during the International Coaching Week, to create visibility of coaching, to invite members to, be part of the supplement, showcase their different specialties in coaching. So they've been quite consistent in that, and the media obviously comes in handy in that particular aspect. And of course, you have individual contributors and sponsors who would partner with the chapter either to sponsor an activity, not just during International Coaching Week or other big events, but on a normal month or year. One organization would say, we want to support you, or we want to sponsor your coffee event, your next education event. So you have those type as well. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Kaveh, on that one.
I think it's great. Lots of great ideas, lots of creativity and innovation. I think one thing I want to just remind ourselves just at this point is that, these 4 boxes are the things that we do to produce a value proposition for our target markets. And sometimes we do them ourselves, which is key activities. Sometimes we do them because we have key resources, and sometimes we delegate them to our partners. So this is where we decide. And typically you can see something when the chapter starts becomes a key activities. And when it gets big, they start doing it through the partners and they delegate. Admin is an example of that. Small chapters start doing lots of admin work to start, but when they get to a certain size, they usually partner with a firm that would look after their admin work. And this is where the movement between key activities, partners, and resources can be seen as chapters go through the maturity curve. Okay, so let's go through the cost structure. What do we have there, Emily?
We have lots of stuff here, including, they need a budget, for example, for the secretariat. They just hired somebody to take care of the admin, logistics, and also during the International Coaching Week, they hire interns to support them in the coordination process. So they have a budget around that as well. There's a cost of maintaining the website, which has been supported in the past by ICF. And then you have the Zoom platform subscription, especially when we all went virtual. This was really a key resource to invest in. And then, of course, there's a professional fees whenever there's legal advice, and then, keeping the books on an annual basis and having to review those. So there's an auditor fee as well that's required. And of course, bank charges and board registration fees.
Fantastic. Shall we go to the last but not the least of the all, which is the revenue stream?
Yeah, and actually really the meat of all this, around how do chapters make their money? Where do they get the revenue from? Other than the rebates that, they get from ICF Global, other than the 12%, how else are chapters then being able to generate their own revenue? So for the Kenyan chapter, one of the ways is education forums. They normally charge a fee for non-members for the education forums. And for example, in the past year, they've had more than 30 forums. I'm sure there are even more than that. So for every event, if you're not a member, you are charged for it. And then you have sponsorships. They've been able to accumulate quite some bit from the sponsorships from some of the key partners and also individual sponsors. And of course, in the future, they plan, to also have speaking opportunities as one of the ways in which they can generate money, where an ICF member, is called to speak and the organization will pay for that. There's also ICF merchandise. We also have the advertising on the website and digital platforms where members are invited. If you want to advertise or showcase your business here, you pay a fee for it. And then there's also the idea around activation or booths, marketing booths. A lot of people have written so many books during the pandemic. I think it's been quite inspiring just to watch. And specifically within the Kenyan chapter, we have about 6 or so, new books in the past 6 months or so. And so being able to invite the booksellers to this event, and, they put up a booth, that's another way of generating revenue for them. And then there's a fundraising and conferences. Yeah.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you, Emily. And thank you, Kenya chapter, for giving us this opportunity to share with the rest of the colleagues of some of the wonderful stuff and creativity that they are implementing within the chapter. So, Emily, I'm going to share with you this diagram. I'm not going to go through this, so let me explain what this diagram is about. So remember, we have all the boxes like value proposition, channel, and relationship. I basically went and I've identified various initiatives that people can do under each box. So for example, if you want to do about credibility, maybe you can focus on Prism Awards. Maybe you can look at the chapter recognition, circle of distinction, young leader awards. If you are trying to connect people and events, maybe you want to think about targeting the business community and creating an event for them, targeting job seekers and creating an event for them. So I'm not going to go through this box. Of course, our colleagues can pause the video, and if they want, they can look at each of the boxes. And by the way, these are just examples. By no means this is a full list. But if we're kind of thinking, oh my God, what can I do around a partnership, we can have a look and maybe get some inspiration of some ideas. And again, there are many, many more things that we can do under each boxes. So I suppose, Emily, at this point, the question is, where do I start? Okay. Mm-hmm. And I want us to just remind ourselves, one way to decide where to start is by looking at this matrix, this 2x2 of high impact, low impact on the vertical versus easy to do, or less easy, or more expensive. And if we kind of categorize our ideas into 4 areas, some would have low impact and they are not easy to do, or they're very expensive, and we call them losing moves. Some of them are easy to do, but they have least impact or low impact. We call them cheap losing move. Of course, what we want to do, we want to be on the top of the grid. And ideally, we want to go for winning moves. So winning moves are the ones that would have the most impact and the easiest to do. And maybe using this matrix, we can categorize some of the ideas we have, so we'll have the right priority of execution. Because we know we cannot do everything, at least not simultaneously together. We have to pick and choose, and prioritization is the key thing in here. So is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap it up, Emily?
Oh, I think, thank you for summarizing that. And hopefully we have given you food for thought and a tool that you could experiment with, with your chapter members or even chapter leaders, and see, what you create for yourselves in this particular category of business development.
Fantastic. And just to remind ourselves, we said that the business model canvas would enable you to have a visual tool. It enables you to have a common vocabulary. It enables you to bounce ideas. And very importantly, it brings to our attention that success chapter strategy development requires alignment of all the 9 blocks. So that is the key things. So I think we've reached end of our time. Thank you, Emily, for partnering with me in this journey. It was fantastic, and I hope that our colleagues got some value from this presentation.
Thank you. Bye. Enjoy.
Bye.